of you who are new, you wonder what classification is. That's just a way of getting to know you and making sure we have people across the professions and the occupations. Ann MacGregor is here to reintroduce herself.
I was born and raised in South Bend, Indiana. My parents came through Ellis Island as Swedish immigrants. They came separately, but they met when they arrived in South Bend. But my father was the oldest of 8, and basically he left Sweden and the homestead because it would be one less mouth to feed. It was during the Great Depression when my parents brought 4 of his younger siblings to South Bend and helped them get launched in this country. Unfortunately, they never taught my brother and me Swedish, and to this day I still regret that. And I actually have more biologic family in Sweden than I have here in this country. I began my professional career at age 10. My older brother had a paper route for the South Bend Tribune, and those were the days when the paper boys went from house to house to collect. Does anybody remember that? But I always helped my brother, and the South Bend Tribune rep would come to the house, and pick up the money and then pay you whatever you deserved or earned. And I asked for my own paper route, and he said, "Well, we don't hire girls." 2 weeks later, I had my own route. So much for persistence. And when I was in high school, in the 10th grade, my high school counselor, as I was beginning to think about my college going forward, he said, "Well, Ann, you have 3 choices. You can be a nurse, you can be a secretary, or you can be a teacher." He didn't listen when I said what I really wanted to be was a physician. I graduated from the University of Michigan with a Bachelor's of Science in Nursing plus a BA degree in Healthcare Administration. And then I spent several years in San Francisco teaching in a school of nursing. But all the while, I was interested in international health. I had applied to Dr. Tom Dooley was a Notre Dame graduate. He had a foundation and he worked in Laos and Vietnam. He didn't hire women. So I lost that opportunity. But in the late 50s, I heard about a new international health program called Project Hope. Hope standing for Health Opportunity for People Everywhere. And it became the vision of Dr. Bill Walsh, who was an internist in the Washington, D.C. area. And it happened to be that when President Eisenhower had his heart attack, Bill was one of the consultants. And so Bill began sharing his vision with President Eisenhower, who had, at that time, developed something called the People-to-People program. To make a long story short, the Navy loaned Project Hope a hospital ship that was used during the Korean War for $1. I was accepted as part of the first nursing staff of 22. The hospital ship Hope had 100 beds. It was a floating hospital. Had all of the amenities that you would think about with a hospital with 100 beds. The main mission was teaching, so when we were invited to another country, we worked with medical schools, nursing schools, allied therapy schools, and so forth. I spent a year in Indonesia, in Saigon, a year in Peru, a year in Ecuador, a year in Guinea, West Africa, and a year in Nicaragua. So I have certainly connected with the images that both Pam Little and Margot have shown us about Shenandoah over the years. The ship was decommissioned several years after I left, but what it did was it expanded the project's mission to landlocked countries. For example, they built a children's hospital in Shanghai several years ago. Before I left, the last 2 years of my career with Project Hope, I was a chief nurse. And before I left on the voyage to Nicaragua, I had said to Bill Walsh that this would be my last year with the project because I had been accepted for a master's in public health at Duke University. Well, during 1966, Dr. John MacGregor came to Nicaragua for a 3-month rotation as a volunteer surgeon, and the rest is history. I arrived in Mason City in January of 1967. It was 25 degrees below zero. Well, mind you, I had been in the tropics for almost 8 years. But I inherited 4 wonderful kids who continue to enrich my life today. I worked initially doing public health for the Migrant Action Program here. It was in the days when Hispanics came into the area. They walked the beans, they worked in nurseries, they were all over north central Iowa. I did that until we had our youngest. In the late 70s, I was eager to get back into the workforce, and in 1980, I began reading about the concept of hospice. Again, I was in the right place at the right time. 1981, was named to the founding hospice board of directors. I retired in the year 2000. Dixie Kavars, I don't think Dixie's here today, but Dixie Kavars is doing a great job as the current executive director. When I first arrived in Mason City, I clearly valued what I saw on the south side of Central Park. And like a bunch of others in the room, we watched that over the years, what was happening with it. So when the call came in early 2005 for a group of citizens to step forward to present a plan to restore the Park Inn Hotel and City National Bank building, I joined Robin Anderson, Chip Kinsey, Bob McCoy, Mike McCoy, and certainly Gene Marinas was our mayor at that time. That was in '05. After I retired, I cared for my dear John through his death at home in '03, so by '05 I was beginning to feel that perhaps I could come back into the real world called life. Little did I know, in the spring of 2005, when Wright on the Park was formed and appointed me the executive director, little did I know what would lie ahead, even though I had written my own job description. Suffice it to say, over these last few years, my being a stubborn Swede has served me repeatedly and continues to do so. It continues to be a great privilege to serve this community that I love dearly. Thank you.